Welcome back to Sleep Empires. If you find a quiet kind of peace in our stories, please consider subscribing to the channel. It costs you nothing, but it helps us more than you know. It tells the algorithm that this is a place worth visiting, and it tells us that someone is listening on the other side of the dark. Tonight we travel together, far away from this room, far from this day, far from anything that may have weighed upon your mind. We are going somewhere very old, somewhere very still. We are going back 3,500 years to ancient Egypt, to the story of a boy, a young king, a pharaoh who ruled for only 10 short years, who died before he had truly lived, and who, by an extraordinary accident of history, became the most famous person of the ancient world. We are going to the story of Tutankhamun. Before we begin, get comfortable, loosen anything tight, sink a little deeper into your pillow, let your shoulders drop, let your jaw soften, let your hands rest open and easy. Take one slow breath in through the nose and let it out softly through the mouth. That is enough. There is nothing more for you to do tonight, only to listen, only to rest, only to be carried gently into another world. Imagine yourself now standing at the edge of a great desert. The night air is warm and still. The Nile flows softly somewhere far below, a silver ribbon under the moon. Above you, the stars stretch wider than you have ever seen them. The Milky Way pours across the dome of the heavens. The ancient Egyptians believed that river of stars was the body of the goddess Nut, stretched across the sky to hold back the darkness. Below you, in the desert, there is a small village. Mud brick houses, palm trees, a few lamps still glowing in the windows. People are sleeping. Children are dreaming. Dogs are curled by their doors. And in the palace, in a quiet room with painted walls, a boy lies asleep. He is small. He is young. He has lived only a handful of years on this earth, but he is the most powerful person in the world. He is the king of Egypt. His name is Tutankhamun. Tonight, gently, we will follow his story, from his birth to his short reign to his quiet death, from the small hidden tomb where he was buried in haste to the moment 3,000 years later when his tomb was found again. We will see his treasures. We will hear about his wife. We will learn what modern science has discovered about his short life. But there is no rush. There is no journey to complete. Only the soft sound of these words carrying you gently into sleep. So breathe slowly. Let yourself settle. Our story begins. To understand the story of Tutankhamun, we must begin before he was born. We must begin with his father. And his father was perhaps the strangest pharaoh in all of Egyptian history. His father's name was Akhenaten. Akhenaten came to the throne around the year 1353 before Christ. At first he was called Amenhotep IV, named for the god Amun, who was the most important god in Egypt at that time. But Akhenaten was a deeply religious man, a radical man, a revolutionary. And in the 5th year of his reign, he did something no pharaoh had ever done before. He decided there was only one God. Only one. The disk of the sun itself. The Aten. He changed his name to Akhenaten, servant of the Aten. He closed the temples of all the other Egyptian gods. He cut off their funding. He sent their priests away. He had the name of Amun chiseled off monuments across the country. He declared that the old gods were false, that only the sun was real, that only the visible disk pouring its golden light onto the world each day was worthy of worship. The Egyptians did not understand. The Egyptians did not approve. For 3,000 years they had worshipped many gods. Now, suddenly, their pharaoh told them that all of that was wrong. The temples grew quiet. The festivals stopped. The familiar prayers were forbidden. People did not know what to believe. And then Akhenaten did something even more dramatic. He left. He left Thebes, the ancient capital of Egypt. He left Memphis, the older capital, to the north. He built a brand new city in a completely empty stretch of desert, halfway between the two. He called the new city Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten, the place where the sun rose. The city was extraordinary. It was built quickly, almost overnight, on virgin sand. It had wide boulevards, grand temples open to the sky, where the sun could shine directly onto the altars, palaces for the royal family, a whole new artistic style where the human body was depicted realistically rather than in the stiff traditional manner. The art of this period shows the king and his family playing, kissing, mourning, laughing. Things no Egyptian art had ever shown before. Akhenaten brought his family to the new city. His wife was the famous queen Nefertiti. Her name means the beautiful one has come, and from her painted images and the famous bust of her face we have inherited, we can see that she was indeed beautiful. They had 6 daughters together. They built their new world. They worshipped only the sun. But beneath all this, something was wrong. The royal family did not seem entirely healthy. Recent studies of their mummies have suggested they suffered from genetic problems. Some of the daughters died young. There were many miscarriages and stillbirths. The family was beset by tragedy. And Akhenaten himself, if his portraits are to be believed, had an unusual elongated head, narrow shoulders, and broad hips. Some scholars believe he had genetic disorders. Others believe the strange style was simply art. Akhenaten and Nefertiti had 6 daughters together, but Akhenaten needed a son, a male heir to inherit the throne, and so he took another wife, a second royal woman. We do not know her name for certain. The hieroglyphs simply call her the younger lady. Modern DNA tests have suggested something strange. The younger lady was very likely Akhenaten's own sister. The royal family married within itself, and from this union a son was born, a small, fragile boy. He came into the world around the year 1341 before Christ. His parents named him Tutankhamun, the living image of the Aten, named after his father's one god, the sun disk. He was the longed-for male heir. He was the future of the new religion. He was, his parents believed, born to continue his father's revolution. But his arrival was the beginning of an extraordinary story, and almost nothing about it would go as Akhenaten planned. Tutankhamun spent his earliest years in the new desert city of Akhenaten. We know very little about his childhood. The Egyptians did not write biographies. They did not write down what babies ate, or what games children played, or who they cried for in the night. But we can guess. He would have lived in the royal nursery of the great palace. He would have had nurses and attendants. He would have played with his half-sisters, the daughters of Nefertiti. He would have heard the morning hymns to the sun. He would have seen his father raising his hands in prayer to the golden disk above. We do not know if Tutankhamun was healthy as a small child. Modern studies of his mummy reveal a body marked by several disabilities. He had a deformed left foot, twisted inward in what we now call clubfoot. He had a bone disease that affected his hips. He may have walked with difficulty. He probably needed a cane to get around. More than 100 walking sticks were buried with him. Some were beautifully decorated. Some show signs of use. He was a young king who, even in childhood, may have struggled to walk easily across his own palace floors. The world around Tutankhaten was already growing dark. Akhenaten's revolution was failing. The economy was in trouble. The empire was contracting. Egypt's foreign territories were being lost. Letters from distant client kings begging for help survive to this day. The letters say, over and over, "Send help, send soldiers, our cities are falling." The letters were never answered. Akhenaten was too focused on his religion, too focused on his sun god. The outside world was crumbling, and he did not seem to care. And then, around the year 1336 before Christ, when Tutankhaten was perhaps 5 or 6 years old, his father died. We do not know exactly how Akhenaten died. He may have been killed. He may have died of illness. He may have died of the genetic problems that seemed to plague his family. What we know for certain is that the world he had built began to collapse almost immediately. There may have been a brief reign by Nefertiti herself, ruling as pharaoh under a different name. There may have been a few months of chaos. There may have been other unknown rulers in between. The records of this period are fragmentary and confusing. The scribes who came after deliberately erased much of this history. But we know that within a year or two of Akhenaten's death, his small son was crowned king. Tutankhaten became pharaoh of Egypt. He was perhaps 9 years old. He was sick. He could barely walk. And the entire weight of an ancient empire was placed upon his shoulders. Of course, a 9-year-old boy does not actually rule a country. Behind Tutankhaten stood 2 men, 2 trusted advisors of his father, who would guide the young king through his short reign. The first was named Ai. He was an old man, a senior official. Some scholars believe he may have been the father of Nefertiti, which would have made him Tutankhaten's grandfather or perhaps his uncle. Ai had served Akhenaten for years. He understood power. He understood the court. He took on the role of vizier, the senior advisor of the king. The second man was younger. He was a soldier, a general. His name was Horemheb. He was a brilliant military man. He had risen through the ranks under Akhenaten. Now he became the commander of the army. He was the practical power behind the throne. He defended Egypt's borders. He rebuilt the army that Akhenaten had neglected. Together, Ai and Horemheb made a decision that would shape the rest of Tutankhaten's reign. They decided to reverse Akhenaten's religious revolution, quietly but completely. In the second year of the boy king's reign, the changes began. The old gods were brought back, the temples were reopened, the old priests were restored, and the king himself was given a new name. He was no longer Tutankhaten, living image of the Aten. He became Tutankhamun, living image of Amun. The change of name said everything. The young pharaoh was now linked to Amun, the ancient god of Thebes, the god his father had tried to abolish. The new desert city of Akhenaten was abandoned. The royal family moved back to the old capitals. The strange new religion of the sun disk was quietly forgotten. Egypt returned to her old gods, her old ways, her old comforts. A great inscription was carved during this restoration. It is known as the Restoration Stela. It describes the state of Egypt when Tutankhamun took the throne. The temples are silent, it says. The gods have turned away. The land is in confusion. And then it describes how the young king restored everything. He brought back the priests. He repaired the temples. He commissioned new statues of the gods. He gave back to Egypt what had been lost. Of course, the young Tutankhamun did not do these things himself. His advisors did them in his name. But the inscription gives him credit, and in doing so, it begins to weave the legend that would help him be remembered. Tutankhamun was married. His wife was a girl named Ankhesenamun. She was older than him by some years. She was also his half-sister. She was the daughter of his father, Akhenaten, by Nefertiti. She had grown up in the great palace at Akhenaten. She had been promised in marriage to a prince. She married her own brother instead. This was not unusual in the Egyptian royal family. The royal blood was considered too sacred to mix with that of commoners. Brothers and sisters often married. Fathers sometimes married their own daughters. The genetic costs of this practice were severe. But the Egyptians did not understand genetics. They only understood tradition. Ankhesenamun and Tutankhamun seem to have been fond of each other. The art of their court shows them in tender, intimate scenes, hunting birds together in the marshes, sitting close in their throne room, touching each other lightly as a young couple in love might. The reliefs are warm. They feel like real affection. The young king and queen were two children, growing up together, trying to govern a great empire. They tried to have children of their own, but the children did not survive. Two tiny mummified fetuses were found in Tutankhamun's tomb. Both were female. Both had been carefully wrapped, placed in small coffins, and buried with the king. They were his daughters. They were his unborn children. Genetic studies of these tiny mummies have suggested they suffered from severe congenital problems, perhaps the same issues that plagued the rest of the royal family. The inbreeding had taken its toll. Ankhesenamun must have been a sad young woman. She had lost her father. She had lost her sisters. She would soon lose her babies, and she would eventually lose her young husband too. Tutankhamun ruled for 10 years, 10 short years, most of which he was a child, watched over by his advisors. We do not have many records from this period. The Egyptians did not write down history the way we do today. They wrote inscriptions praising their kings. They carved scenes of religious ritual. They left records of building projects and battles. But the daily life of a small, sickly boy king is mostly invisible to us. We know he loved chariots. His tomb contained 6 dismantled chariots, beautiful ones, decorated with gold leaf and inlaid jewels. He loved hunting. There are scenes of him riding into battle and shooting bows. Some scholars believe these are pure propaganda. He probably could not actually hunt much, given his physical problems. But he was depicted as a powerful warrior king, as all Egyptian kings were depicted, regardless of the truth. He loved beautiful things. His tomb contained exquisite jewelry, ornate boxes, intricate alabaster vessels, painted chests. He had life-size statues of himself. He had thrones inlaid with gold and lapis lazuli. He had ostrich feather fans. He had elegant beds. He had sandals decorated with images of his enemies, so that he might tread upon them with every step. He had a wig box. He had cosmetic jars. He had musical instruments. He had board games. He had everything a wealthy young king might want. And he had walking sticks. So many walking sticks. They tell us, perhaps more than anything else, about the truth of his daily life. He needed them. He limped. He may have been in pain much of the time. He was a frail boy in an enormous palace, surrounded by powerful men, married to a sad young queen, trying to rule an empire he did not really understand. And then, in the 10th year of his reign, when he was about 18 or 19 years old, he died. How did Tutankhamun die? This question has fascinated scholars for a century. For decades, the leading theory was murder. Tutankhamun had been struck on the back of the head, some believed, a blow from his ambitious advisors. He had been killed so that I could take the throne. But more recent studies have suggested something different. CT scans of the mummy have shown that the marks on the skull were caused after death during the mummification process. The young king was not murdered in his bed. What did happen, scholars now believe, was a combination of misfortunes. Tutankhamun broke his leg, perhaps in a chariot accident. The break was severe. It became infected. At the same time, he was suffering from a serious case of malaria. DNA studies have detected the parasite in his remains. The combination, the broken leg, the infection, the malaria, would have been deadly for any young man, especially one already weakened by his congenital health problems. He probably died over a period of days or weeks, his condition worsening, his fevers rising. He died in the end of complications, not from a single blow, but from a body that simply could not heal itself any longer. His death was a disaster for the royal family. He had no son. His 2 unborn daughters had died with their mother in the womb. The line of the great 18th dynasty, which had ruled Egypt for 200 years, was about to end with him. Ankhesenamun, his young widow, did something extraordinary in this moment. She wrote a letter, not to anyone in Egypt, to the king of the Hittites, Egypt's traditional enemy, far to the north. The letter said, "My husband is dead. I have no son. I do not want to marry any of my servants. Send me one of your sons. I will make him pharaoh of Egypt." This was unheard of. Egyptian royal women did not marry foreign princes. The 2 empires had been at war for generations. But Ankhesenamun was desperate. She must have been terrified of what would happen to her alone in a palace full of ambitious men. The Hittite king was suspicious at first. He sent envoys to investigate. They returned saying it was true. The Egyptian queen really had no choice. So he sent one of his sons, a prince named Zananza. The young Hittite prince left his homeland and traveled south toward Egypt, toward his new bride and his new throne. He never arrived. Somewhere on the road between the Hittite Empire and Egypt, the Prince Zananza was killed. By whom, we do not know. By what means, we do not know. The Hittites accused the Egyptians of murder. Tutankhamun's general Horemheb may have been responsible. He may have simply intercepted the prince and had him quietly removed. Ankhesenamun's plan had failed, and then, very soon after, she disappears from history. Some scholars believe she was forced to marry the old vizier Ai. A ring has been found bearing both their names. If this is true, she was about 20 years old, marrying a man perhaps in his 60s, a man who had once been her grandfather's friend. She would have been miserable. She would have had no power, and shortly after, her name disappears completely from the historical record. We do not know what happened to her. We do not know where her body lies. She, too, is one of the lost figures of Egyptian history. Meanwhile, the young king Tutankhamun had to be buried. There was a problem. He had died unexpectedly before a proper royal tomb could be prepared. The traditional 18th dynasty tombs were vast, with hundreds of feet of corridors and chambers. Such a tomb took 20 years or more to build. Tutankhamun had only ruled for 10 years. His own tomb was not finished. There was no time to wait. So the priests made a hasty decision. They took an existing, smaller tomb in the Valley of the Kings, a modest tomb that had perhaps been intended for a noble or a high official. They expanded it slightly. They quickly painted its walls with religious scenes. They prepared it for a king, hastily, in the 70 days allowed by the mummification ritual. The tomb we now call KV 62 was small. It had only 4 chambers. The corridors were short, the decorations were rushed. The paintings, when archaeologists later examined them, showed mistakes. Hieroglyphs misspelled, figures drawn poorly. The priests had been working in haste. But Tutankhamun was still a pharaoh, so they gave him a proper royal burial. They placed his body, wrapped in linen, inside a nest of 3 coffins. The innermost coffin was made of solid gold, weighing more than 100 kilograms. They placed the coffins inside a great stone sarcophagus. They placed the sarcophagus inside 4 nested gilded shrines, each one larger than the last, fitting tightly inside the small burial chamber. They filled the antechambers with everything a king might need in the afterlife: chariots, beds, furniture, statues, jewelry, clothes, food, wine, boxes upon boxes. They sealed the doors with plaster. They stamped the seals with the royal cartouche and the image of Anubis. They left the young king to his eternal sleep. But the world was not done with Tutankhamun's tomb. In the years that followed, the small tomb was nearly robbed twice. Both times the robbers got inside. Both times they were caught before they could empty the chambers. The priests resealed the tomb. They tidied up the disorder the robbers had created. They reset the seals. And then, gradually, over many years, the tomb was forgotten. The new pharaohs of the 19th dynasty built their own tombs nearby. Workers digging into the cliffs to make a new royal tomb threw their rubble down into a small wadi. Bit by bit, the rubble piled up. Eventually, it covered the entrance to Tutankhamun's small tomb completely. The doorway disappeared beneath the debris. The location was lost. The young king's name slowly faded from the official king lists. Because he was associated with the failed religion of his father, the later Egyptians tried to forget him. They left him out of the records. They erased his memory. For more than 3,000 years, Tutankhamun slept beneath the sand, unknown, untouched, almost completely forgotten. The Valley of the Kings was searched by tomb robbers and archaeologists for centuries. Almost every other royal tomb in the valley had been emptied. The mummies of the great pharaohs had been removed in ancient times. The treasures had been stolen. The chambers stood empty. By the late 19th century, many archaeologists believed there was nothing left to find. An American lawyer named Theodore Davis spent 12 years excavating in the Valley of the Kings in the early 1900s. He found several minor tombs. He found pieces of jewelry. He found ostraca and other small artifacts. And in 1912, after years of digging, he declared in his famous words that the Valley of the Kings was exhausted. There was nothing more to find. He gave up his concession to excavate there. The concession was taken over by another wealthy patron of archaeology, a British aristocrat named Lord Carnarvon, and Carnarvon hired a man named Howard Carter to lead his excavations. Howard Carter was a remarkable man. He had been born in Norfolk, England, in 1874. He was the son of an artist. He came to Egypt in his late teens as a young copyist for the Egyptian Exploration Fund, drawing the inscriptions on temple walls. He had a sharp eye, a meticulous hand, a patient temperament, and, as he grew older, a deep and almost obsessive love of ancient Egypt. Carter believed Theodore Davis was wrong. He believed there was at least one undiscovered tomb left in the Valley of the Kings, the tomb of a young, almost forgotten king. The boy pharaoh, whose name had appeared on a few small objects found by Davis himself. Tutankhamun, Carter and Carnarvon began their excavations in 1917. They had a small team of Egyptian workers. They had a modest budget. They worked carefully, methodically, year after year. They cleared the floors of the valley. They examined every fragment they found. They searched, and they searched, and they found nothing. By 1922, Lord Carnarvon was losing patience. He had spent enormous sums of money on the excavation. There was no result. He decided to withdraw his funding. Carter traveled to England in the summer of 1922 to plead his case. He met Carnarvon at his country estate, Highclere Castle. Carter showed him the small remaining area of the valley they had not yet investigated. He begged for one final season. Carnarvon, perhaps moved by Carter's passion, agreed. One more year. If they found nothing, the work would end forever. Carter returned to Egypt in late October 1922. He began clearing the small area that remained. It was the location of some old workmen's huts near the entrance of the tomb of Ramses VI. The huts were in the way. They had to be removed to investigate beneath them. On the morning of November 4th, 1922, Carter arrived at the dig site to find the workers strangely quiet. Something had been found. One of the boys carrying water had noticed something unusual beneath the floor of the cleared area. A single stone step, carved into the bedrock. Carter ordered the workers to clear more sand. By the end of the day, they had revealed a second step, then a third, then a fourth, a staircase cut into the rock descending into the cliff. Carter could hardly contain his excitement, but he was disciplined. He stopped the workers at the 12th step, where the upper edge of a sealed door had appeared. He could see, even from above, the seals of the ancient priests. He covered the staircase carefully. He posted guards. He sent a telegram to Lord Carnarvon in England. The telegram said, "At last we have made a wonderful discovery in the valley. A magnificent tomb with seals intact. Recovered same for your arrival. Congratulations." Lord Carnarvon left England as soon as he could. He brought his daughter, Lady Evelyn, with him. They traveled by train, by ship, by another train, all the way down to Luxor. He arrived in Egypt on November 23rd. 3 days later, on November 26th, 1922, they opened the tomb. It was late afternoon. The party gathered at the bottom of the staircase. Howard Carter, Lord Carnarvon, Lady Evelyn, the archaeologist Arthur Callender, Carter's assistant. They had cleared away the rubble behind the first sealed door. They had reached a second door, also sealed, also stamped with the ancient seals. Carter took a small chisel. He made a tiny hole in the upper left corner of the second door. He pushed an iron rod inside to see if there was open space beyond. There was. He took a candle. He lit it. He held it up to the small hole. The flame guttered as warm, ancient air rushed out toward him. Air that had been sealed inside the tomb for more than 3,000 years. He pressed his eye to the opening. Lord Carnarvon, standing just behind him, could not bear the suspense. He asked, his voice tight, "Can you see anything?" Carter was silent for a long moment. He could not speak. His eyes were adjusting. He was looking, for the first time in human memory, into the tomb of an ancient Egyptian king, untouched, sealed, filled with treasures. Finally, he found his voice. He turned to Lord Carnarvon. He spoke 3 words that would echo through history for the rest of time. "Yes," he said, "wonderful things." The chamber they had entered was the antechamber. It was packed almost to the ceiling with treasure. 3 great ceremonial couches, shaped like animals, stood against one wall. Beside them, dismantled chariots, their golden wood and inlay glinting in the candlelight. Boxes upon boxes, stacked one atop the other. Statues, vases, beds. a throne inlaid with gold and lapis, showing the young king with his queen. 2 life-size statues of Tutankhamun himself, guarding a sealed door in the far wall, stared back at them from the shadows. The statues were black with gold accents. They wore the royal headdress. Their arms were raised. Behind that sealed door, they would later discover, was the burial chamber itself. It took Howard Carter more than 10 years to fully excavate and catalog the contents of Tutankhamun's tomb. More than 5,000 objects were recorded. Every single one was photographed, drawn, described, and conserved. The work was painstaking. The team had to remove items in the correct order without damaging anything. They had to consult specialists. They had to invent new conservation techniques. They had to do everything with the eyes of the world watching. In February 1923, they broke into the burial chamber itself. There they found 4 great gilded shrines nested one inside the other, fitting almost exactly within the small painted room. The shrines were made of cedar wood, covered with gold leaf, inscribed with religious texts. Each one had to be carefully dismantled and removed. Inside the smallest shrine was a stone sarcophagus carved from a single block of yellow quartzite. The lid was made of red granite. They lifted it carefully. Inside lay a coffin shaped like the king himself, lying on his back, his arms crossed over his chest. A coffin of beautiful gold-covered wood, inlaid with colored glass and semi-precious stones. Inside that coffin was another coffin, and inside that a 3rd coffin. The 3rd coffin was made of solid gold. It weighed more than 100 kilograms. It was the most extravagant single object ever recovered from the ancient world. And inside that golden coffin lay the mummy of Tutankhamun, his face covered by a mask. The mask was made of 2 sheets of solid gold, hammered together and inlaid with lapis lazuli, carnelian, and quartz. The face was beautiful, young, serene. The expression was calm. The eyes were wide open, watching the world beyond. The mask weighed 11 kilograms. It is, perhaps, the most famous artifact in human history. Carter and his team began the long, delicate work of unwrapping the mummy. They found that the heat of the resins used in the embalming had partially fused the wrappings to the body. The unwrapping was difficult. They had to cut through the layers carefully. As they removed each layer, they found amulets, more than 140 of them, tucked between the linen strips. A scarab beetle over the heart, an ankh near the throat, the eye of Horus beside the chest. Small gold protective charms placed in exactly the right spots by the ancient priests. Then they reached the king's body. He was small, slender. His teeth were good. His hair was reddish-brown, still preserved beneath the wrappings. His features could still be made out. A long, thin face, a small chin, a youthful expression, the face of a boy who had died too soon. The news of the discovery had already spread across the world. Newspapers carried daily reports. Tourists flocked to Luxor. Lord Carnarvon was photographed at the tomb entrance. The world was, briefly, completely obsessed with this small, glittering tomb of a forgotten boy king. Egyptomania swept across Europe and America. Fashion changed, architecture changed, music and art and film were all suddenly filled with Egyptian motifs. And then, in April 1923, just 5 months after the tomb was opened, Lord Carnarvon died. He had been bitten on the cheek by a mosquito. He had cut the bite while shaving. The wound became infected. He developed blood poisoning. Within a few days, he was gone. He was 56 years old. The newspapers were ready. They had a sensation on their hands. They invented the story of the curse of the pharaohs. They claimed that an inscription inside the tomb had warned of death to anyone who disturbed the king. No such inscription was ever found. But the legend spread quickly. Over the following years, several other people connected to the excavation died. Some were old, some were ill, some died in unrelated accidents. But every death was attributed to the curse. The truth is far less dramatic. Most of the people who entered the tomb lived long, healthy lives. Howard Carter himself lived for another 16 years after the discovery. He died of natural causes in 1939 at the age of 64. He had been the first man to look into the tomb. He had handled the king's mummy. He had touched the gold mask. The curse, if it existed at all, had nothing to do with the deaths of his colleagues. But the legend persists. Even today, people speak of the curse of Tutankhamun. People love a good mystery. People love the idea that the ancient kings can reach across the centuries and touch us still. What modern science has revealed about Tutankhamun is more interesting than any curse. In recent decades, his mummy has been studied with the latest technology. In 2005, the body was placed inside a CT scanner. Thousands of detailed images were taken. They revealed, for the first time, the true state of his health. The clubfoot, the bone necrosis in his hip, the leg fracture that had not healed before his death. They confirmed many of the theories about his weak constitution. In 2010, DNA studies were performed. These were extraordinary. The DNA revealed that Tutankhamun was the son of Akhenaten. His mother was a previously unknown mummy, kept for decades in a chamber called KV-35, near the body of Amenhotep II. The mummy is called the Younger Lady. She is, the DNA shows, the daughter of Amenhotep III, which means she was Akhenaten's sister. Tutankhamun's parents were brother and sister. The Egyptian royal family had been marrying within itself for generations. The genetic damage was extensive. Tutankhamun himself suffered from multiple deformities. His daughters, also conceived in close relations, did not survive. The 18th dynasty was, in a very literal sense, dying from within. Forensic artists have used the CT scans to create a reconstruction of what Tutankhamun looked like in life. The result is striking. A slender young man with a long face, full lips, and a slightly elongated head. A young man who would not have stood out particularly in a crowd. A young man who, but for an accident of history, would have been completely unknown to us today. Tutankhamun lay in his tomb for over 3,000 years, unknown and forgotten. Then, for less than 100 years, the world has known his name better than that of any other ancient king. He has become a symbol of ancient Egypt. His golden mask appears on coffee mugs, on T-shirts, on the covers of books. His face is taught in schools across the world. He is, by an extraordinary accident, the most famous pharaoh of all time. Even though he was a minor king, even though he died young, even though he ruled briefly and accomplished little, he has become immortal. And today, his tomb still sits in the Valley of the Kings. His treasures are being moved, slowly, to a magnificent new museum in Cairo called the Grand Egyptian Museum. There they will be displayed together for the first time since their discovery. His golden mask, his coffins, his chariots, his thrones, his walking sticks, his amulets, his unborn daughters in their tiny coffins. All of it gathered together, telling the story of a small boy who became somehow the most famous person who ever lived in the ancient world. His mummy itself remains in the tomb where he was buried. The young king sleeps still in the small painted room beneath the cliffs. The tomb is open to visitors. Anyone can walk down the stairs that Carter discovered. Anyone can stand before the small painted burial chamber. Anyone can look upon the face of the boy king. He is no longer hidden. He is no longer forgotten. He is, in a strange way, more alive than any other Egyptian who ever lived. Before we leave the story of Tutankhamun, let us linger a little longer. Let us walk slowly through some of the rooms and lives that have only been briefly touched in our telling tonight. The world this young king was born into, the people he loved, the treasures he was buried with, and the man who, after 3,000 years, finally found him. Let us return for a moment to the city of his birth, Akhenaten, the city his father built from nothing in the empty desert. It was, for a brief and shining decade, one of the strangest cities in the ancient world. It stretched along several miles of the eastern bank of the Nile in a place we now call Amarna. It was surrounded by cliffs. It was protected from the world, and it was unlike anywhere else in Egypt. The city was laid out around a long central road, sometimes called the Royal Road. The palaces and temples stood on either side. The great Aten temples were open to the sky, unlike the dim secret sanctuaries of the older gods. Sunlight poured down onto every altar. Servants carried offerings of bread, beer, and lotus flowers to be blessed by the rays of the sun. There were no roofs, no shadows, only the brilliant Egyptian sky and the gentle smoke of incense rising into it. The royal palace was vast. Painted floors showed scenes of plants and birds. Painted columns rose to ceilings shaped like the heavens. The royal family lived here in unusual openness. Reliefs from this period show Akhenaten and Nefertiti and their daughters in tender, intimate moments, eating fruit together, playing with each other, mourning when a daughter died. The art was warmer, more human, more honest than anything Egypt had produced before. We can see, even today, glimpses of the daily lives of this strange royal family. Tutankhamun, then still called Tutankhaten, would have grown up in this world. He would have played in painted courtyards. He would have heard the morning hymns to the sun. He would have eaten in the royal nursery with his half-sisters. He would have watched, from a distance, as his father raised his hands to the golden disk in the sky and spoke long prayers no one quite understood. He would have known no other world. To him, the old gods were stories told by old servants. The new god was simply the sun. And then, suddenly, that world ended. The city of Akhenaten was abandoned. The palaces were left empty. The temples fell silent. The painted floors cracked beneath the sun. The young king Tutankhamun was taken back to the old capitals. He was given a new name, a new religion, a new identity. The first home he had ever known was sealed shut and left to the desert. Today, the ruins of Akhenaten lie in silence. The walls of the houses still stand to about the height of a child. The painted floors are mostly gone. The wind has worn away most of what remained, but you can still walk through the streets if you visit the site. You can still see the foundations of the palace where a small sick boy once played. The world he was born into is dust now, but the dust still remembers. We must speak for a moment of his mother, or perhaps his stepmother, the famous Queen Nefertiti. Nefertiti was, by all accounts, an extraordinary woman. Her name meant the beautiful one has come. From her surviving portraits, we know she had a long, graceful neck, almond-shaped eyes, and a calm, dignified expression. The famous painted bust of her, now in a museum in Berlin, is one of the most recognizable images of any ancient woman. She was not Tutankhamun's biological mother. His mother was the younger lady, Akhenaten's sister, whose name we do not even know. But Nefertiti was the chief queen. She raised Tutankhaten alongside her own daughters. She would have been a constant presence in his early life. He would have called her mother or stepmother or some name we cannot now recover. And then she disappears. Around the 12th year of Akhenaten's reign, Nefertiti vanishes from the historical record. She simply stops appearing in inscriptions. We do not know what happened to her. Some scholars believe she died. Some believe she was disgraced and pushed aside. Some believe something stranger. Some believe that after Akhenaten's death, Nefertiti herself ruled Egypt for a brief time, under a different name. There is a pharaoh named Neferneferuaten who ruled briefly between Akhenaten and Tutankhamun. The name is in some senses Nefertiti's. Many scholars believe these were the same woman, the beautiful queen in her last years ruling the country as a king. If this is true, Nefertiti may have been the regent who actually brought Tutankhaten to the throne, who oversaw the early years of his reign, who protected him from the chaos of the post-Akhenaten years. And then, perhaps, when he came of age, she stepped quietly aside and let him become Tutankhamun. Her body has never been found, or it has been found, but we do not know which mummy is hers. Several candidates have been proposed. Some scholars believe a damaged female mummy in Chamber Cave Y35 may be Nefertiti. Others believe she lies somewhere yet to be discovered. The famous bust of her in Berlin shows her face, but her bones, her body, her physical remains are lost to us. She is one of the great mysteries of ancient Egypt. Now let us speak of his wife, Ankhesenamun. She was older than him by perhaps a few years. She was his half-sister, the daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. She had been born in Akhenaten. She had grown up there. She had known the strange new religion of the sun. She had lost her sisters one by one to disease and accident. She had survived the collapse of her father's world. We have many small images of Ankhesenamun and Tutankhamun together. They are some of the most touching images in all of Egyptian art. The young couple appear in informal, affectionate poses. She offers him flowers. She fastens a collar around his neck. She stands beside his chariot, holding his bow for him. He pours perfume into her hand. They touch each other gently. They look at each other with what seems like real fondness. They are two children, married to each other, growing up together in a vast palace, watched over by powerful men. But Ankhesenamun's life was not easy. She had no children who survived. Her two daughters, both born too early, both with severe birth defects, were buried alongside her husband. She would have grieved over them. She would have hoped for more. And then, in the 10th year of their marriage, she lost Tutankhamun himself. She was perhaps in her early 20s. She was a widow. She was alone in a palace surrounded by men who wanted her throne. She tried to escape. She wrote her famous letter to the Hittite king, begging for a foreign prince to marry her. The letter survives in fragments in the archives of the Hittite capital. We can still read her desperate words across 3,500 years. "My husband has died," she wrote. "I have no son. People say you have many sons. If you would send me one of your sons, he might become my husband. I do not want to take a servant of mine and make him my husband." I am afraid. The Hittite prince was sent. He was murdered on the road, and Ankhesenamun disappears from history. A small ring found in the archaeological record bears her name beside the name of the old vizier. If she was forced to marry him, she would have been miserable. She was about 20. He was perhaps 65. Her name is never mentioned again. We do not know how she died. We do not know where she was buried. We do not know what her final years looked like. Like Nefertiti, she has simply vanished into the silence of the past. Now let us return, very briefly, to Howard Carter, the man who, 3,000 years later, would finally bring all of this back to light. Carter and his patron, Lord Carnarvon, had been digging in the Valley of the Kings since 1917. They had a small team of about 50 Egyptian workers. They had a modest budget. They worked carefully, methodically, season after season. And for 5 long years, they found almost nothing. The first season ended with the discovery of a few small fragments of pottery. The second season produced some inscribed stones, but nothing significant. The third season found a small cache of objects bearing the cartouche of Hatshepsut. The fourth season produced what Carter himself called only minor results. By 1921, after 4 years of work, they had spent enormous sums of money on essentially nothing. Carter was a difficult man. He had a sharp temper. He argued with the Egyptian authorities. He fell out with old friends. He was meticulous about his work, but impatient with everyone around him. He had been forced out of an earlier archaeological job many years before because of a dispute with French tourists. He had spent years as a freelance painter and small-time excavator. The Valley of the Kings was his great chance, and it was slipping away. In the summer of 1922, Carnarvon called Carter to England. They met at his magnificent estate, Highclere Castle. Carnarvon told him bluntly that he could not justify the expense any longer. The work would have to end. Carter pleaded with him. He showed him the small remaining area of the valley they had not yet investigated, a small triangle of ground near the entrance of the tomb of Ramses VI. He believed something was there. He could feel it. He asked for one more season, just one more. Carnarvon, perhaps moved by Carter's intensity, perhaps tired of arguing, agreed. 1 more year. If they found nothing, the partnership would end forever. Carter would lose his patron. He would lose his concession to dig in the valley. He would lose, in all likelihood, his career. He returned to Egypt in October 1922 with a heavy heart. He hired his Egyptian foreman, and the work began. They cleared the small remaining area, 1 wheelbarrow of sand at a time. Carter watched every load. He looked at every flake of stone. He was searching for any sign, any clue, any hint that he was right. On the morning of November 4th, when the boy carrying water discovered the first step beneath the sand, Carter must have felt his entire life turning on a single moment. 5 years of failure, months of doubt, the constant fear that the next season would be his last. And then, suddenly, a single carved step where there should have been nothing. He stood there in the morning sun. He could not yet know what he had found, but he knew it was something. After 5 years of searching, he had found something. The rest, as they say, is history. The doorway, the waiting for Carnarvon, the candle held up to the small hole, the wonderful things, the years of patient excavation that followed. What did they find inside? More than 5,000 objects in the end. Each one was photographed. Each one was sketched. Each one was carried out carefully by Carter and his team and placed in storage chambers in the valley. Some of the objects were extraordinary. There was a great throne made of cedar wood overlaid with sheet gold. The back of the throne showed Tutankhamun seated, with his wife Ankhesenamun standing before him, anointing him with perfumed oil. The faces of the young couple were painted in soft, natural colors. Their feet were bare, their movements were tender. It is, perhaps, the most intimate piece of art surviving from the entire ancient world. There were 6 chariots dismantled and stacked, beautiful chariots made of bent wood covered in gold leaf with intricate inlay. Tutankhamun probably did not actually drive them himself. His foot would not have allowed it. But chariots were a symbol of pharaonic power. Every king needed them. There were beds, 3 of them shaped like sacred animals, a bed shaped like a cow, a bed shaped like a lion, a bed shaped like a strange composite creature with the head of a hippo and the body of a lion. These were not sleeping beds. They were ceremonial beds. They were where the king was placed during the embalming ritual. There were boxes of clothes, linen kilts, linen tunics, sandals, including a pair with images of bound enemies painted on the soles, so that with every step the king would tread upon his foes. There were gloves, there were head coverings, there were chests of jewelry, pectorals of gold and lapis, rings, bracelets, earrings. Most of it had been worn by the young king himself in life. There were musical instruments, there were game boards, there were small wooden statues of the king and queen. There were stone vessels of every kind. There were dried provisions for the afterlife, fruits, breads, meat sealed in clay jars. And there was the small wreath of flowers. Among all the gold and jewels and ornate carved objects, perhaps the most touching find was a tiny wreath of flowers. A simple thing, cornflowers and olive leaves woven into a small garland. It had been placed across the brow of the king when he was buried, across the gold of the second coffin, a last simple human gesture. Carter believed it had been placed there by his young widow, Ankhesenamun, her final goodbye. A small token of affection in the midst of all the gold. By the time Carter found it, the flowers had dried to almost nothing. They were dust held together by their own dried sap. But they had not crumbled. They were still recognizable. After 3,000 years, the cornflowers were still blue. It is this small wreath, perhaps more than the gold mask or the chariots or the great shrines, that tells us who Tutankhamun really was. He was not just a king. He was not just a mummy. He was not just the most famous artifact in the world. He was a boy. He was a husband. He was a child of a complicated family. He was someone who, when he died, was given a small wreath of cornflowers by someone who loved him. And so we come to the end of our long, quiet journey. The story of Tutankhamun. A small boy, a sickly king, a husband who died too young, a father whose children never lived, a king whose reign was brief and unimportant, but who, by the slow turning of fate, became immortal in death in a way he never was in life. He is sleeping now in his tomb. He has been sleeping for 3,500 years. His mother is sleeping somewhere nearby in the valley. His wife is sleeping, perhaps, in a tomb that has never been found. His father lies somewhere too, his bones disturbed and scattered by time. And above them all the same stars wheel through the heavens, just as they did when the young king first opened his eyes upon the world. The same stars, the same sky, the same patient indifference of the heavens. Take one slow, deep breath now. Feel the warmth of the desert leaving you. Feel your body soft and heavy, resting, safe, far from any journey. Whatever your day held, let it go now. Whatever tomorrow holds, it can wait. There is only this moment, this quiet, this rest. The young king will sleep on, just as he has for 3,000 years. The stars will still be there in the morning. The story of Egypt will still be waiting whenever you wish to return. But for now, you're not in Egypt. You are here, in your bed, in your room, in your own warm, peaceful place. The sheets are soft. The pillow is cool. Your breath is slow. Your body is heavy. Your thoughts are beginning to drift gently, like a small reed boat on the surface of a quiet river. Let yourself sink now. The story is over. The night is yours. The sleep is yours. Whatever has worried you, let it dissolve into the dark like sugar into water. Whatever has tired you, let it slide off your shoulders like a cloak. There is nothing more to do. There is nowhere more to go. There is only this quiet, this soft heaviness, this deep, kind sleep, opening like a doorway in front of you. Good night, gentle traveler. Sleep well. Sleep deeply. Sleep long. May your dreams be soft and warm. May your rest be complete. May you wake in the morning into a new day, just as the sun has risen over Egypt for 30,000 mornings. Good night. Sleep now. Sleep.